Welcome along to part 2 of our video tutorial series where we're learning how to create Flappy Bird using Python code. In the first tutorial we got as far as setting up our game screen dimensions. We've got a title at the top, the background thrown in, and a little scoreboard section as well. So we didn't get too far into the game itself. What we will be doing though in this video is adding the Flappy Bird into the game. So he's going to have animated wings to make it look like he's flying. It'll have gravity pulling him down towards the ground. We should be able to set up our mouse events, so when we click our mouse buttons, he flies up in the air. And we'll also add a game over screen so that when the bird hits the ground or the top of the screen, our game will be over. Alright, so let's get started on doing that just now. First thing we'll do is bring in the bird, so I'm going to go to the top section of my code above the draw function and add in a bird variable and set that equal to the actor of the first bird image in your images folder. So bird 1. You would have noticed there was 4 bird images in the folder there. They all look similar, but you'll notice that the wings change on each of those images, and when we run those images on a loop, it'll make a little animation to appear as though the bird is flapping his wings and flying in the sky, which we'll do a little bit later on. Once you've got your bird in, we can set up the X and Y position for our bird to start at. So for the X axis, I want my bird to start a little bit in from the left-hand side of the page, so about 75 pixels across should look good. And the Y axis, coming down from the top of the page, about 100 pixels I think will be a good start position. To just test those coordinates out to see if the bird is in a good spot, you'll need to draw your bird in the game. So go down to the draw function, and I'm going to put it above the ground.draw. I'm going to write bird.draw. Okay, once you've got that, it's probably worth pressing play just to quickly test it, and you'll see that your bird is 75 in from the left, 100 pixels down from the top. Pretty good start position by my standards, so I'm going to leave him right there. Next thing I'm going to do is get the little wings flying, so I'll get this animation working. So back up the top, outside of the draw function again, we're going to write bird.images equals and open up a set of square brackets. And inside those square brackets, we just need to list all the images we want to include in our animation. So we've got bird 1 through to bird 4 that we need to include. So inside quotation marks, write bird 1, put a comma, open up another set of quotation marks, get bird 2, then bird 3, and then bird 4. That looks pretty good to me. So now the computer knows which 4 images we want to include in our animation. To get the computer actually playing that animation and running through those 4 images in that list, we need to create the update function. So define the update function just below where you were writing. Now remember, the update function is one of the main functions in Pygame Zero. It is running each time our frames are refreshed, which is about 60 frames per second, so it's updating fairly fast. And what we're going to be doing in this section, we'll put another bird section in, and all we need to do is write bird.animate. This function, the animate function, actually comes from the Pygame Zero helper module. Okay, and all that is going to do is look inside this list and play those images one after the other on repeat, and you will end up with a little animation that looks like this. Now his wings are moving fairly slow for my liking, so I'm going to go back up outside the update function and write bird.fps. FPS stands for frames per second, and then you can choose how fast you want your bird flapping those wings or how fast the animation is played. So I'm going to write in 50 to start with, just to show you how fast you can get this little guy flying. So that's obviously way too quick. You can lower the number to lower the speed. So this is at 5 frames per second. And I reckon for a good looking flap of the wings, 10 frames per second looks pretty realistic. So I'm going to roll with 10 frames per second for my bird's animation. Okay, so that's looking good. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some gravity into the game. So the gravity is going to pull our bird down towards the ground. To do that, we need to set up a few new variables. I'm just going to write set up game variables as my comment, and I'm going to create 2 variables here that will affect how fast the bird falls down the page. I'm going to set up the gravity to 0.3, and then I'm going to set the bird.speed to equal 1. Both fairly low numbers. You don't want the bird falling too fast to the ground, otherwise the game will be impossible to play. But you'll see, even though you think they're going to be doing the same thing, gravity is how fast the bird falls towards the ground, and the speed is how fast the bird moves up or down on the y-axis. Probably don't even need to write y-axis, so how fast the bird moves up or down. Okay, and as I said, they look like they're doing the same thing, but once we put some formulas in just a moment, you'll see that they both have different functions. So what we're going to do is actually head down to the update function now, and we're going to introduce gravity into our game. So to do that, what we'll do is adjust the bird's position on the y-axis. So we're going to write bird.y equals bird.y plus bird.speed. So what it's doing is it's looking at its current position on the y-axis, and it is moving at speed 1 down the page. So each time our frames are updated, it's moving 1 pixel. And if you want to test that out, just to show you what I mean, let's have a look. There's our bird falling down the page at speed 1. If you want it to move faster, let's say speed 3, you'll see that the bird starts moving a lot quicker down the page. But it's definitely speed 1 is what we want to use right now. So we've got our bird falling down the page, but it looks a little bit unrealistic. If he was actually falling from the sky, he would generate a little bit more speed over time. Okay, so that's where gravity comes in. So on the next line, what we're going to do is adjust the bird.speed. So bird.speed will equal bird.speed plus the gravity. So each time our frames are updated in our game, we're going to be adding 0.3 to our speed. Okay, so it goes 1.3 and then 1.6, 1.9, and it gets faster and faster. So the longer the bird falls down the page, the faster he should be falling. So it's going to be very quick when I run this animation now, but have a look at what happens. Okay, it was a bit of a more realistic drop down the page. Very fast there, a bit hard to see, so test it on your computer so you can see what I mean. If you slow that gravity down, you'll see that it starts moving slower down the page. 0.2 probably isn't too bad either. I think 0.3 looked the most realistic. That's why I went with 0.3 for the gravity. Okay. Now to tidy up this code a little bit, we know that we can write this code a little bit neater. So instead of bird.y equals bird.y plus bird.speed, it's a lot of birds, let's write bird.y plus equals bird.speed. And same for the next line, bird.speed plus equals gravity. That's just a better way to write them. Okay, so I'll just put in some comments here to explain what's happening. So this one is move the bird down the y-axis at this speed. Right at the set speed, which is speed 1. And gravity, we'll just say the longer the bird falls, the faster it is. Well, the faster it will fall. That's probably the best way to describe it. Okay, so you can see, or we kind of see, how those two variables, speed and gravity, are used together to make the bird have a realistic fall towards the ground. Okay, so we've now got gravity in our game. Next thing we want to do, though, is make our bird fly. So instead of just falling to the ground, and you'll see when he falls, he will just keep falling forever and ever. We want to try and prevent him from hitting the bottom by flying back up in the sky. And the way we fly in this game is by using the mouse buttons. Okay, so we're going to create a new function here, just above the update function, called the onMouseDown function. So that's how we write it. We define a function, and it's on_mouse_down. There's no space in the name of functions. That's why we use some underscores there. Open and close a set of brackets, put a colon at the end, and now we need to tell the computer what to do when the mouse button is pushed down. What should we do? Well, we want our bird to fly, so our bird should only fly if he's alive. So I'm going to create another variable just above that mouse down function called bird.alive, and I'm going to set it to true. So when our game starts, the bird is alive, and I only want it flying if the bird is alive. So if bird.alive, That's just saying if our bird is alive. What do we want our bird to do when we press the mouse button? Well, we're going to change his speed to something in the negatives. Remember, if you want to go back up the y-axis, you have to take numbers away from the y value. So I'm going to take off 6.5. I worked this out prior to making this video tutorial. I found that's a pretty good speed for our bird to move at. And that should make our bird jump up minus 6.5 pixels each time we click the mouse. So let's have a little look. There we go. So each time I click the mouse, the bird is just having a little jump back up in the air. And you can see I can get right to the top, and then gravity will start pulling him down towards the ground again. Alright, that looks pretty good. What we can do to make it look a bit more realistic, and sound a little bit more realistic, is throw in a sound. So in your sounds folder, we've got this sound here called wing, which is the flap of a wing. So I'm going to write in sounds.wing.play. So each time we press down on the mouse button, not only will our bird jump up in the air a little bit, it will also play the sound of the wing flapping. It's not much, but it does add to the game. Okay, it helps immerse the player in your game. Alright, so that looks pretty sweet. The issue we've got now is our bird can fly out of the top of the screen and still fly well below the screen. So we want to prevent our mouse from hitting the top of the screen or hitting the ground down here. So to do that, we're going to need to get into our update function and create an if statement. So let's go down into our update section, and I'll just put a comment that says end the game if the bird hits the top or bottom of the screen. Alright, so first of all, let's put in an if statement, and we'll just get the bottom of the screen working. So if our bird hits the bottom of the screen, so we're looking at the y-axis again, and we're looking at the position that the bird is on that y-axis. So if the bird.y is greater than the height of the game screen, so the height is 480 pixels. So if our bird goes below that 480 pixel mark, which is the height, what do we want our game to do? Well, obviously we want our game to end, but we haven't quite got that all set up just yet, but we will in a moment. We'll write bird.alive will equal false. So that variable is now saying that the bird is dead. And I'm going to play a sound called die. So sounds.die.play. Alright, let's test that out. So when the bird hits the bottom of the page, it should just play a sound, and it will probably play it on repeat as our bird keeps falling down the page. Okay, so that's working well. We've got the sound playing as soon as our bird hits the bottom of the page. Now, as I said, the bird will continue dropping down and down and down unless we tell it to stop. So that's probably what we need to do shortly. One other thing I want to do before that, though, is if the bird hits the top of the page, I want the same thing to happen. I want that sound to play that he has died. So instead of writing a whole new if statement, we can use the OR operator. Okay, so if the bird's y-axis is at the bottom of the page, or if the bird's y position is less than the top of the page. Okay, so less than 0, that means he's gone above the top of the page. Then just play that sound that he's dead. Let's have a look. Okay, that worked pretty well. So when he went above the game screen, we heard him die, and he just fell off the page again. Okay, so far it is doing what I want it to do, but the next step, I guess, is to make a game over screen appear. Just let the user know that the game is over. So I have got an image in the images folder here that says game over, and if you have a look at it, it's pretty small. We will be able to resize it within the game in a moment, but that's what I want to appear on the screen. So we need to go up the top again, just after where we've created our bird, and let's create the game over symbol, or actor I suppose you'd call it. Now this actor needs a variable name first of all, so I'm just going to call it game over, all one word, and I'll attach the actor game over to it. Now I'll set up its X and Y values next. So when it does appear on the screen, where do we want it positioned? On the x-axis, I want it smack bang in the middle, so half of 640, which is the game width screen, game screen width, half of that is 320. And then on the y-axis, I'm going to bring it down, I reckon about 200 pixels down the page. Now, as I said before too, that game over symbol is quite small, and you can actually resize it within the game. The way you do that is write gameover.scale, and you set your scale to a particular number. So if you want it twice the size of what it currently is, you type 2. 3 times the size would be 3. 10 times the size would be 10. I reckon about size 3, or scale size 3 would be good, so that's 3 times its current size. So it should appear on the game screen a lot bigger. And this is another function that is part of that Pygame Zero helper module. Okay, so really handy little feature to have in your game. Okay, so what we want to do is get this game over sign appearing once our bird hits the top or the bottom of the screen. So the next step is to head down to our draw function to draw it on the page. And this is where we change our draw function up a bit. We're going to need to use an if statement. And it's basically going to say if the game is playing, so our bird's alive, then we're just going to draw our bird and our ground on the screen. And also the score, I guess. But if our game is over, then we're not going to draw these things. We're just going to draw the game over screen. Okay, so I'll show you how to write it. Inside the draw function, leave that first line as it is. That's drawing the background on the page, and that background is always going to stay there no matter what, if the game is playing or if we're finished. Then we're going to write an if statement that says if the bird is alive. So if bird.alive, and put a colon. Then we're going to highlight everything below there and just press tab to indent it. So that just says this is what needs to happen if our bird is alive. So we draw the bird, we draw that ground section on top of our background, and then we also draw the score up in the top left hand corner. Okay, coming in beneath that, I'll make a bit of room. We need to put an else statement. So this is going to say what happens if the bird crashes. So I might put a comment in. What happens when the bird crashes? And I guess this bit up here will be what happens when the game is playing. Okay, so in this else section, what happens when the bird crashes? So let's put in that gameover.draw. That will draw that little game over symbol on the screen. Let's give it a test run and we'll see if this if statement actually works. So far so good. Our game is playing, the bird's been drawn, the ground has been drawn. Okay, so we've got our game over symbol appearing in the, on the screen there, which is good. But an issue we've got was the sound kept playing. Alright, and the reason the sound is playing is because the bird actually falls off the bottom of the page and just keeps falling, and that keeps triggering that sound to keep playing because it's below the height of the game screen. So what we need to do basically is put our bird back up to his start position, back within the game screen once the game is over. Alright, so what I'm going to do is just go bird.x equals and bird.y equals, and thinking back we had 75 and 100 for the starting coordinates. Now once he goes back up to that position, he's just going to fall straight back down the page again. So what we can also do is turn the gravity off and the speed off. So he's just going to be sitting there in his start position doing absolutely nothing. Well, let's give that a test run and we'll see what happens. Okay, that sounds better. So our bird hit the bottom of the screen, and then we only heard the sound play once, and the game over symbol appeared, which is perfect. Let's just draw the bird in to see where he actually ends up, to make sure he does end up back in that start position. There we go. So he hit the bottom of the screen. He ends up back up here at 75 and 100 for his coordinates. He's got no gravity or speed affecting him anymore, so he just sits there and flaps his wings. And that's all happening in the background because we don't actually draw the bird when the game is over. Okay, so that's got that game over screen looking pretty good. Some other stuff we could add to that game over screen. I reckon this score we could probably keep on our game over screen. I wonder if we can put that up here instead. Let's just test that out. There we go, so that looks good. So we can remove the score from here for now. And at the moment, our score is being drawn along with our background, so they never disappear. They're always in the one position. And no matter if the game is being played or if it's ended, the score and the background will always appear. Something else I want to put in is a little message to tell the user to click their mouse if they would like to play again once the game is over. So down in this else section here, I'm going to write in, well, it's going to be very similar to what we've written up here. So it'll be screen.draw.text. And in quotation marks and brackets, I'll say click your mouse to play again. And I'll close those quotation marks up. Now I'm going to choose a color for my text. So color will equal white. Put a comma. I'm going to use the center of the text to align it this time. So on the x-axis, I'll put it at 320, which is the middle of the page. And I'll put in about 300 pixels down the page now. So a little bit below that game over symbol. After that, let's do the same effects as what we had on the score. So that's the shadow color, and the font size. Now I don't know why there's a little comma there, we'll get rid of that. Okay, let's give this a run. So I just copied and pasted the shadow color, and the font size in. Alright, so let's just quickly die again. Okay, so you can see the little message we've got written now. Click your mouse to play again. And if I click my mouse to play again, nothing actually happens. And the way we get around that is just jump back up the top here to your mouse down function. Okay, so if our bird's alive, then that's what happens when we click our mouse. But if our bird's dead, what do we want to happen when we click our mouse? All I want to do is change the bird.alive variable back to true, which means our game should restart itself. So let's give it another test run. We'll just kill ourselves. And if I click my mouse again, the bird.alive variable should be set to true, and we can start playing again. And that can just happen over and over, as long as you want. Now one final thing, if you watch the bird hit the ground here, he actually hits the bottom of the screen when he dies. I actually want him to hit the top of this ground and die. Okay, so he doesn't have to hit the exact bottom of the screen. And the way you get around that is just go into your update function where you've got this if statement saying if the bird.y, so if its position on the y-axis is greater than the height. I'm going to take about 40 off that, so height minus 40. That just brings it back up the page a little bit, so it should be around the top of that ground. So as soon as he hits the ground there, game over. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. It might be worth throwing in a few comments in places where we haven't got them yet. So up here on the mouse down section. So what happens when the mouse button is pressed? That just explains that the bird will jump up. So make the bird fly up a little. And that just plays the sound of the wing. We don't need a comment for that. And this one here basically restarts the game. We've got comments in here. Yeah, that's all good. Got the score. Yep, I think all the other comments are pretty straightforward. Nothing else really needs explaining. Okay, so that's probably all we need to do in this video. We've got our bird flying nicely in the sky. He's animated. He can crash, and we can restart our game. Alright, so that's looking good. In the next video, we might bring in some obstacles for our bird to avoid, so the green pipes that will be flying across the screen. I will catch you in that next video.